This podcast is a part of the More Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Leader Podcast by Pattern Talent, where we interview great leaders and we seek to understand leadership. I'm Brad McDonald.
And I'm Taylor Jessup, and we really hope that you enjoy this episode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Another episode of the Daily Leader, episode 319. No, that's not quite right, but I'm hoping that we make it that far. That would be really fun.
We will.
I think it's episode like 15, somewhere around there.
Yeah, we're in that ballpark.
Yeah, we are in that ballpark. We are super excited that you're joining. We have an amazing guest here today. We are special cheers out there to the Scottsdale podcast studio that will be in our show notes. If you are in Scottsdale and looking to record. We always also give a couple other shout outs to Jesus at Video Pilot. Does a fantastic job if you need him to do any of your podcasting needs there. April Norris has our fantastic music that she wrote, and she writes a lot of others, including a really fun Christmas album, fun fact. And then Ellery May, Candle Co., lighting a tiny fire in your house that smells like heaven. That is my wife. That store is actually...
Janelle,
closed.
Taylor didn't bring the candle this time again.
No, I'm a failure.
I don't know why I'm talking to Janelle right now. Yeah. Because I know she's not going to listen to this
Actually,
podcast.
What's funny is neither of our wives have listened to one full podcast.
Our wives don't like our podcast.
They actually don't like it at all. So we hope that you like it. And if you do like our podcast, speaking of that.
Yeah, by the way. Actually hit that button.
Yeah, actually hit the like, subscribe. You know, if you're one of the people out there that has the, Daily Leader Podcast tattoo, or you got it shaved into your head, or whatever it is, we would just ask that you take a moment, like, subscribe, follow us, Instagram, YouTube, all your podcasting places, Spotify, Apple. That would be.
Don't forget iHeartMedia for all the Android users.
I do. No. I have somebody that uses iHeartMedia. I play tennis with him. Yeah, I'm serious, and I think he still has like commercials on it too, or iHeartRadio. Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
And he just listens. I haven't talked to anybody else that like. Has commercials in their music while they're listening since like Pandora in like 2012.
Yep.
Like it's been a long time, but he does. It's fantastic.
Yeah. He's an Android user.
Shout out to Russ Markovich. Yeah.
Thanks, Russ. We love you.
Okay. That is quite a long intro here. But you're going to intro our guest that we've been
excited
chatting it up for a while.
Yeah. We have been hanging out for the last hour.
Yeah. We were supposed to start an hour ago.
Recording,
yeah.
which we should have just started recording. So
because it was great.
Today's a really exciting day. We've been talking about this here's what's funny. I've been talking to you about this for like 8 weeks.
So you haven't actually talked to me, but you were talking about it.
Yes.
Okay,
so finally I reached out to you.
Yeah, I like it.
And today our guest is Brad Larson. So I've known of Brad for a long time. Brad has been an acquaintance for a long time through our family relationships. He's been a pastor. He's been a sales executive at GoDaddy, and right now he's serving full-time with a company called StudioC, and he's in a role focused on revenue generation, partnerships, and business development. And he's a thinker. He is a pastor. He's a leader, and he's also doing some really cool stuff with a group and a community of men here in Phoenix called Arena of Greatness. So I'm going to leave it there because I want you to be able to tell your own story. Okay. So please tell us all about your family. Tell us about kind of how you got here in life, whether that's, college and early career, some of your career experiences. I'd love to hear about, what even brought you to Scottsdale in the first place. And we'll let you go from there.
Okay, well, the story starts out, my grandfather came here in 1963. He's actually an immigrant from Italy. Came from New York to Fresno, where he got in the grocery business, and then had this idea about a golf driving range through his brother, and then somehow decided that Arizona, because there was just desert, that this would be a great place to start a driving range. So that's what he did in Mesa, Arizona. He built a driving range, and then he kind of took a Sam Walton approach model to buying tons of like golf equipment in bulk, and then basically built up a store. So that's how my family actually came to Arizona. So I was actually born here, but raised in California. And so the story, let's make it go fast, but at the same time, it's important. I think our stories are important. They matter.
Yeah.
Right. So I was 2 when my parents got divorced. So if I characterize my childhood, it was unstable. There was instability. Right. It's not bad. It's just part of the story. So I was 2. I don't really remember much about that. I don't know if you guys remember a whole lot of stuff when you were 2. Probably not.
Not a lot.
Mom got married 6 months later. My stepdad had some impact on our family. Basically, he was a little religious. I think my mom was reaching out to try to kind of figure out how to stabilize her life or whatnot. So she found a church, almost like a drug addict could find cocaine. But it got better. Okay. So anyway, my stepdad actually had an older brother, older sister. My sister got sexually abused by my stepfather. And then during that time, my brother had epilepsy. So he was having grand mal seizures as a kid. So this is the environment, right? And we're moving a lot, changing a lot, and all of that's important because as I look back now, some things were happening that were kind of shaping us, like all of us. Like we have big T traumas, 5-pound weights, we have little T traumas, 1-pound weights, but they add up over time. So for me though, I watched that. I remember being 8 years old on the edge of my mom's bed. She gets divorced for the second time. She's crying. My sister has moved out now because she's spun into drugs and alcohol, and my brother is having grand mal seizures. And I remember sitting on the edge of the bed thinking to myself, I can't add any more chaos to this world. So as a kid, you sort of put it all together, not because you're nefarious, because you want to not add chaos. So in a lot of ways, I think I just sort of kind of just locked it all down. Like everybody else has needs, I don't have needs, what we can do. Yeah. But the good news is that I got heavily involved in sports and athletics, and I was okay. I was good. So I was probably 10 years old. My mom gets remarried, found this family that really took me in, and my buddy, his name is John, he would pitch, I would catch, he would catch, I would pitch, and we went into all-stars, got into high school, and that really became a main place for me to train and grow. I'll be honest, and to this day I look back at it with fondness because of that. So I had coaches. They gave me insight from the outside. I trained with a group of brothers. We had a goal, and all of that was huge in my life. So then it became a little bit too much. By the time I got to my senior year, I was an all-city, all-county catcher, and all my buddies were getting drafted or they were going to Division I schools. I didn't get those invites. I was getting invited to Division II, 3 schools, NAIA schools, and I thought my life was over for getting those. Sounds funny, but I did. During my senior year, my mom came to me and asked me, hey, son, have you ever thought about going to Bible school? And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm pretty sure I cussed her out. And at that time, though, life was starting to get chaotic. And bottom line is, I had this moment where I felt like a nudge. I'm not sure if it was the Lord fully that I knew it, but I did have a sense I should do this. So I was 17 years old, and I made the decision to do it. I was also voted least likely to go in ministry by my high school peers. And it was actually shocking to everybody. But there was something, I was a kid who grew up in church. I don't know for you guys, your stories, but I hated church. It seemed false and fake, except for one dude used to ask me, he's like, hey, Brad, I saw your box scores. Hey, you did pretty good this weekend. He took interest in me. And for some reason, that fundamentally shifted the way that I saw it. So I gave it a chance. I loved God. I hated church. I'm going to be honest with you. Yeah. That's my statement. Yeah. Anyway, I ended up going to Bible school at 17, on a whim. This school was going to start a few days later, and I was like, let's do it. So I'm 17 years old. I move out. I go to Bible school, and that became the formation of what started taking shape. And there's a lot more that's there, but fundamentally, all of those pieces really have shaped me to who I am. Is that enough?
That's a great start. So tell us what happened. So what was okay, you leave college. Where do you go? Do you go into ministry? Do you go into business? What was kind of some of the first exposure to leadership and that kind of work that you got?
So my family were entrepreneurs. So I was always around it. I was shaped in that environment, and they were intentional. When my mom got married when I was 10, my stepdad owned his own business. He had about 25 trucks. He ran an awning contracting building business, and then my mom ran a golf store in Ventura, California. So they were dinks, double income, right? And there was lots of stress, right? There was a high amount of stress.
I wish I was a dink. Come on. Just kidding.
We're gonna move on, Brad. We're gonna move on.
We could ask your wife. Maybe she thinks you're a dink.
Yeah.
Anyway, Yeah, so I grew up in that
She
environment,
does.
so there was a high propensity. But when I went into ministry, like obviously the heart of that was to change the world. So
Yeah.
I'll fast forward it. There's pieces to this, but I had a friend that was my Bible school like roommate that ended up introducing me to this evangelist, and this guy was traveling all over the world, and he's like, hey, you should meet this guy. So I did, and like I'm in my church, and everybody's talking about like changing the world or saying things like, hey, we've got that nation covered in prayer, and for some reason in my heart, like that didn't seem like that was getting it done. So I was like, hey, we should put feet to our prayers. So I decided to go. First place I went was to India. So I moved from California to Oklahoma to join this evangelist, and essentially the first trip I went to was India. I'm in India. We're drilling water wells, and we're preaching or taking the gospel to these massive villages. So every village in India is like 1 million people. So the first time I go there, there's 200,000 people on a just dusty
That's a
soccer field.
village.
That's a village.
That's a village.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's one
that's a
village.
very large village.
It is.
It's not what I imagine when I think of the word village.
Yeah, so I'm
So-
a kid who grew up across the street from a country club.
Yeah.
Right.
And now you're in India.
All right, so now I'm in India. But I
That's
remember this was definitely a deposit. Like I come back off of this field, and we had asked all these people, how many of you have ever heard of Jesus, and or who have never heard of Jesus, and every hand went up, and I was like, oh, I thought we were doing this with TBN or whatever. I thought we had the nations covered, and clearly that wasn't the case. So something happened in my heart. I watched these people respond, and came back to what we would call a hotel. It wasn't a hotel room. It was just a shanty of a place. But my Bible literally flipped open. Not that I subscribe to like just flipping your Bible open, but it
Little
opened
Bible
up to,
roulette.
Yeah, a little Bible roulette.
Can't hurt anybody.
And the passage was, when Jesus saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion and he healed them. And this was my theological strength at the time. I was like, I wonder what the word compassion means. I'm going to look it up in Webster's dictionary. But this is powerful. It said to have an awareness of someone's suffering with a desire to alleviate it. And I felt that night God had put compassion in my heart. I saw something. And I think that there was, I'm not going to make it a formula, but something that happened to me as I saw the multitudes. My heart was moved. I wanted to help. And that began to transcend both ministry and business. Like,
Yeah.
I want to help people, man. And it's developed after that time.
Well, we're on a mission to eradicate the world of bad leadership. So you're going to help a lot of people today. Anybody who listens to this podcast, I think, is going to be helped today.
Yeah. 100%,
So
man.
you'll have
No, that's-
compassion on leaders. A lot in New York, Los Angeles, and Phoenix,
Yeah,
according to
why-
our listening
I don't
stats.
know why people
So-
from New York are listening. So
Hey, man,
much.
we'll take it.
Yeah.
Hi, New York.
Yeah.
Hi, LA. We love you.
So, Brad, one of the questions we ask everybody that comes on the podcast, and we've kind of been talking about this for an hour prior to this, but without this specific question. But we asked everybody, so what is leadership? Like, how do you see leadership? And kind of wondering your perspectives on like business versus maybe more of a religious or a church institution. Like, is there a difference? How do you see it? But just what is business? You can take that whichever way you want. Or excuse me, what is leadership? And take that however you want.
Well, I'll say this. Where did the word leadership even originate? Historically, it seems that it came about after the Industrial Revolution from a management theory guy. It's actually its origination. And then from that time period, a lot of people have really taken the word and made it almost like an idol. So I think in essence, what I see leadership as is just impact and influence. It's influence. But as I look at it in both spheres, I think it's similar. But when I look at it through the lens of the leader that I look at, like a sensei in the dojo, Jesus, right? Like the one that I want to follow, right? We all have gurus that we follow, but if I follow in Jesus, really it's servantship. He said basically the Gentiles lord it over you. It won't be this way with you. Shall not be this way with you. If you want to be great, serve. He didn't say servant leader. He just said serve. I think following and serving actually make great leaders. Leadership is about learning. So I think that is not the common cultural consensus to leadership. Leadership is about authority and power and dominance and control and things like that. But I think at its essence and its beauty, I think leadership in every sector and sphere is actually about seeing people wanting something for them and figuring out how to unlock that. And if you can actually not be mesmerized by the outcome you want for selfish gain, but actually for their gain, then you actually can extract beauty and wisdom from people. I think everybody has beauty and genius in them. And when you start to put, like Dale Carnegie said, right, put a 10 on everybody's head. They may not be a 10 the way that you're a 10, but once you see that in people and actually you're present with them, then you can hear their story and you can unlock it. So I think that that's what I have a sense of leadership is.
That's great, man. Yeah, it seems like it kind of flips it on its head a little bit from, hey, I need to lead and make this big charge for my team, to asking the question, hey, how can I serve my team? How can I serve my company? How can I serve my people? How can I serve my audience? We were talking before the podcast of kind of the story brand idea of like making, they go under this whole premise that if you have a company, your company is not the hero, the client is the hero, right? You're trying to serve them and meet their needs. I think that's a fantastic flip for people to think about. What would it look like if in leadership, rather than being the one to like, hey, I'm going to be the hero, but I turned around and tried to make everyone else the hero?
Yeah. Well, I think to both, right, your customers and even your employees, like what is it that they dream about? What is their passion? If you can find that, then you can actually unlock, and they'll serve what the mission is. And do you have a compelling mission? And it's funny because, it's like if I took the Chick-fil-A, like I don't think that making chicken sandwiches is like the most compelling mission, but that's not their mission. It's something greater and grander, So it's kind of locking that in. But
it is interesting because in that model, right, if you actually turn around and you're looking to serve them, if you're looking to figure out how can I make my team the hero, your productivity of that team might skyrocket, right? Because you actually care and you actually are invested. And so it no longer becomes, hey, I'm just making a chicken sandwich, but you're engaged with them. They may know the heart and the understanding and going, hey, the guy that I'm looking up to wants the best for me. So you know what? I want the best for him too. And I want the best for like this entire team. Like if you can build that framework, man.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to one of my other questions. I feel like one of your strengths is your ability to focus on relationships and intentionality. And as you define leadership and you define it in terms of influence and servanthood, why are intentional relationships so important for leaders? Why is that like a critical aspect of making great leadership what it is?
Well, I'll say this. I'm 49 years old, so I'm reflecting a little bit less on my resume and more on my eulogy. And that practice is helpful to think about, like when you're being lowered into the grave and there's a group of people standing over you, they're probably not going to read your resume. They're gonna say things about how you impacted their life.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we think about, I think there's, we talk about impact and influence, but I do look at the way that we are wired, which culture has pushed us against this, and there's so much dis-ease in culture. We were created for connection. We were created for relationship. And when you agree to that, even though you may not actually think you need that, because everything is like, let's grind, hustle, right? But if you take two rocks and grind them, what happens? They erode. But it sounds great, right? I think you can build things that are great by understanding the depth of people and the fact that you need people. Like leaders carry a lot of weight. And as a result of that, they're used to carrying weight. And I know this feeling. You just feel like everybody you show up for everybody else. You can only last at that for so long until you admit, no, I'm a human and I need others. You can actually invite people in. I do this with my kids, man, because I tell my kids often, I'll be like, dude, I love being your father, man. And I'm also a human. And every now and again, as much as I love being an ATM machine for you, like I'd love it if you would just like put your hand on my shoulder and say like, how are you, Dad? So I have to train them. But we're not trained as leaders because what we carry is the weight and the responsibility. Yeah. And we think that we are superhuman. Yeah. We're superhumans, but we're not superhuman.
That's a good distinction.
Does that make sense? Yeah. We're finite. And so at some point, a leader will have to address that in his own life, that he actually needs people. And if he doesn't, what he will do is sedate and suppress it. some way, somehow. He'll do it through control. He'll do it through information. He will do it through drugs, alcohol, affairs, sex. Just is. That's just the truth.
And I feel like high performers, especially leaders, there are leaders who I would say are like especially high performing. They're highly driven. They love risk. They want to be in environments where they win big, they lose big. They might want the scale and the scope of their work to be really significant and large. Why do high performers in particular choose that sedation?
Because it's a drug. Being a high performer and a high achiever gets you accolades and gets everybody talking about you, and then you lose a part of yourself, right? So it just is. I don't care if you speak on stages and everybody, like, you get up and you share all your things, right? Like, as pastors, I've always said this, right? Like, if you sit in church, right, for 52 weeks a year and the pastor shares 5 points to every message, like, can anybody live 280 points? The answer is no. No human is that great, okay? But the reality is when somebody is, and the truth is when somebody is aware of where they're at, they'll actually help more people. But we like to hold people up as idols. Yeah. We do. We just like people to be at a certain stage and level to the detriment of them. And if you've been alive long enough, you'll watch people that are carrying a weight of that significance. They cannot sustain it because it's like Atlas holding, 100 pounds over your head. At some point, you've got to admit as a leader, I'm a human. Now, that doesn't make you a victim, but if you don't address it, you'll be a villain. And you'll actually start hating everybody because they aren't ever aware that you're a human. But secretly, you'll never say that you're a human because that sounds weak.
Yeah.
When in reality, you just are a human. And so that's where the intervals and cadence, right, that has to come into play. Yeah. If that makes sense.
No, it does. It makes a lot of sense. One of the things I'd love to hear you talk about is why, and I'm going to use a strange word in the context of leadership, but I think you're going to take it to a really cool place, and it's the word intimacy. Like, why do leaders, in order to be healthy, need to engage in intimate relationships in particular, and what does that look like?
Yeah. I think intimacy is like, we could break it up into me, see. It's vulnerability.
Right.
It's the ability to be known. I think what happens, I've heard somebody say a lie. You could use the acronym, a limiting idea you've entertained. Mm. We've hosted a lot of lies. And lies are like grapefruits in your pocket. You might not think anybody can see them, but we can see them, right? And so it comes out in certain ways, right? When a person is living in a lie, they're not aware of it. They've hosted that thing for so long. As a leader, I got to wake up at 3 a.m. I've got to, I'm going to watch Jocko, then I'm going to watch David Goggins. I'm going to, run 400 miles.
Dude, quick pause. Okay, so like early on in my marriage, it was when Jocko was like really starting to take off, and I downloaded on iTunes his like album. Yeah. And his Wake Up track was my alarm. Yeah. And so the first day that happened, like I hadn't told Beck or anything, I put my phone on the other side of the room with my alarm on, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, I don't know, 5 a.m. or whatever. And it's like, wake up, and she's like, oh. She's freaking out. And I'm just like, it was like very effective. Now I don't do that anymore because I was going to have to start sleeping in another room for my wife if I was going to maintain that. But for a while there, that was my alarm. And to your point, like to use some of the verbiage you've taught me, like that produces for a while, right?
It does.
But there comes a point where the lack of intimate friendship in my life as a leader, I erode, and I can't sustain that kind of high performing, sort of like Jocko driven, daily motivation kind of thing. What's the antidote to that? How do I actually begin to fix?
I'll tell you this. I tell it this way because I choose, right? We can choose to be the type of leader, right? What's called the attractive character in marketing, right? I can choose to be the leader who has arrived and knows everything. I don't subscribe to that personally. You can be the evangelist or the researcher, right? Or the reluctant hero. That's the posture I take, right? I go, I've learned a few things. I don't know everything, but let me help you. I've got a few things. I've read some books and not doing a lot of the things that I've read, but I'm doing a few of them, right? So I think reluctant hero is a good posture to take as leaders because it's too difficult to carry the weight of I've got it all figured out and I wake up at, and do everything perfectly. I do think though that I could say this, I can do push-ups. You know why? Because I do push-ups. Whoa, hold on now, Brad. There's nothing ego-driven about that. You know what I can also do? Pull-ups. You know why? Because I do pull-ups. So if I look at Jocko or all these people who exist to sell products, there's good in what they're saying for sure, and it's motivational, and we need motivation and inspiration, but we also need metabolization. And so what's good for one person isn't always good for you, right? Like I do wake up actually at 3:45 in the morning, right? Ooh, Brad's cool.
Do you wake up to Jocko?
I don't. I don't.
But you might tomorrow.
You could
tomorrow.
maybe.
Yeah, but I have listened to it. He's like, good. I've listened to that one too. But anyway.
Yeah. The donut.
I do. But I go to bed at like 8:39. But that's a rhythm that developed over time. But I like 3:45 in the morning because it's quiet. And then I like to work out at 5 a.m. because it's done. Yeah, there's no magic in that. But the point of it is, then it's knocked out. And I just have found, and research will tell you that working out at 4 p.m. is probably the best time. Well, all right, I'm not going to do that. Because I can read a lot more in the morning and be quiet, and I like to spend time. For me, my relationship with the Lord and developing intimacy is I'm pretty complex because I've had some instability issues happen in my life. So having to sort through that requires a lot of writing and thinking, right? I need to write about stuff that's processing, and it's just what I've found. But everybody has a time frame that works better for them, and I think that's part of getting to know yourself.
Let's skip real quick to this one: high performance and high maintenance. So this is in our slow burn section, but I kind of want to insert it right now.
Okay.
Why have you found that high maintenance approach allows you to be high performance? Unpack that framework for us a little bit.
I think the picture we go with is I think everybody's a Ferrari, right? High performance, got 740 horsepower under the hood, but if you don't have any fuel, you're just a paper mache on the side of the road. That's the problem, is not recognizing that it's $800 to get an oil change in a Ferrari, right? That helps people who want to be high performance to go, oh, that's true, right? So now I can acquiesce a little bit to, that's not weakness, that's actually wisdom.
Right.
Wisdom is you've got to put fuel in the tank, and then you've got to figure out what's the fuel that I run on. And the fuel that you run on is actually a little bit more interesting than most. I need connection. I need to connect with other men. What I've found is that friendships for men has actually been battered, and men have been, basically beat up instead of built up. We actually need to learn how to practice having true friendships. I don't need feel better friends. I like feel better friends, but I want get better friends. And so there's kind of a balance of those two things. But finding friendships as you get older in life, or even as you transition and change, it requires a framework that you have to follow, right? Like I say this, it's a book I've read, it's actually right there, Building a Band of Brothers, little small book that actually gives you a good framework that says, the first thing that you do is you invite somebody, hey, let's go watch a UFC, let's go grill out, but you've not developed a deep friendship at that point, right? Let's go to a movie, and you stare at a screen. At some point, you now have to share your story. And then that person has to know a part of you, and that requires trust, which requires time, which you have to build up. So that sounds high maintenance, but I just think it's you want to be high value. You actually, which instead of high performance, I want to be high value. And in order to be high value, then I have to actually, I have to maintain. I have to go in and work on some things in order to do that. So,
Yeah,
I love that.
That's super good. Can we circle back just in light of that to intimacy for a moment? Because I think it's kind of a word that can scare a lot of people off. And I even love
Totally. And in the context of leadership, I think absolutely it's like a run for the hills.
Yeah. And even in the intimacy, which I think is great, right?
I don't want anyone intimacy.
Right.
I want them to see, let's go back to Josiah Gono, episode 2.
Yeah.
I want them to be impressed by me.
Oh, 100%.
I don't want them to see the expression of me.
Yeah, I want all of our listeners to be impressed by both of us right now. More so
Yeah.
me than you, but yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
Please buy our product. We don't have one yet.
So how do we like, this can be our practicality corner. I'm looking at Jesus, our camera guy right now. But like practically, okay, what does it look like to have intimate relationships that help us be a sustainable human and leader?
Yeah, so let's talk practically. I think something that's helped me, a practice I do every year, I go away for a day or two by myself and I write out the story of my life. That really helped me. And I'll tell you where it came from.
Wait. Let me make sure I catch this real quick. So, like, you go away, like out of town or something, like to a hotel or a cabin, or like you just, or like
Could be local.
Okay.
Yeah. But I do go to a hotel, basically spend some time, and in a journal that I have, because I don't know about you, but there's pieces of my life that I actually either forget about or are just repressed. They're painful to look at. But when I was so growing up both of my parents have been married multiple times apiece. And so like when I met my wife, who I met when she was 12 and I was 15, like I wanted to be a great husband. I didn't realize like I had no context to be one. So I knew I was gonna have to grow in this space. But part of it was like I wanted to appear to everybody. I was gonna do all the right stuff and read all the right books, but I never dealt with this part of my life. It was almost like I was ashamed that it existed. I was ashamed of things that I had done, things that like were hard. In fact, when I started to go back and realize like they had changed, like I can tell you now, I was 8 years old on the end of my mom's bed, and you're like, oh, okay. That came out of writing. I didn't remember that until I actually paid some attention, and I was like, dang, that's where I learned to hide my life.
So you literally just get away and chronologically just write
as
the
much as I can
story of
remember.
your life.
Right.
That's
And
amazing.
It's been happening for years, so like then there's more pieces that I remember, which is crazy. But I just give time and space because, right, you know, we hear these statements that sound super like lame, like heal the boy, heal the man, you know, and that doesn't sound cool, I'm gonna be honest with you. But the reality is you still carry that 5-year-old little boy who suffered abandonment or hurt or abuse or whatever it is, or went through these situations that shaped you. And I think that is what actually makes us more, soft to the people that we lead, is that we're actually humans that are aware of our story.
Yeah.
It makes us better leaders, but I think we're talking about practicality. I think the practicality is like, be familiar with what went on. Stop being ashamed of it.
Yeah.
Start owning it and start sharing it, and don't do it immediately, right? I don't get in a group of people that I just met and then just throw it out there. But I have gotten pretty familiar with my own story, but it's not just what I've happened in life. Like I could sit here and tell you, like, as a kid who grew up in church, I had sex out of marriage. I don't know if that happened for you. Okay, but in addition, I had a child.
Not nearly
out of
as
wedlock,
enough
right?
for Taylor as he would have liked.
What's that?
Unfortunately for him.
Yeah, that's true.
When you have a child out of wedlock after you go to Bible school at 17, okay, and then that brings a lot of like weight and shame. It's one of the most beautiful parts of my life. My daughter's now 27. I have walked through that in such a way that God was like, hey, you've been looking at the what you did years ago, but it's like, but why? I think it's such a great question. Most people don't ask that. They just want to appear that they are just awesome. I actually want to be awesome. Someone said it this way, right? We all want to be known for being great. I don't think many people want to actually be great. And at some point in my life, it's like, I actually want to be great, and I want to be whole. I want to be integrated. And I think that's a question that you have to ask yourself, right? It's a question that we talked about earlier. Jesus said, like, do you want to get well? What a freaking great question. And the answer for a lot of leaders is like, I don't. I would just like to appear well.
That's right.
Yeah.
Cool. Yep. Great. I think there's a growing group of people who are like, no, I want to get well. So I'm going to buy that cold plunge in that sauna, because, you know, they told me that if I do this breath work, I'm going to be
that's
well.
how it goes.
And
Yeah.
There's some good in it.
Yeah. No, that's super good. So in order for me to kind of continue to be sustainable and live and function, I can do it and be superhuman for a while, right? But in order for long-term and really wholeness and healthy success, I need to, sounds like kind of get honest about what really is going on in my life, what has happened. You talked a lot about, reflecting on that, going through, and then finding safe people to be able to share, right? Which to me, that rids shame of whatever the story is and whatever the parts that I don't like, or hey, even, and that's not just past, right? I mean, that's current. Like, hey, currently I'm coping with my job, and maybe I don't have the language yet by drinking a bunch of alcohol, but finding people that we can be safe with in that, right? And then sharing. That's the intimacy that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So
why do those words sound so like weak to us?
yeah,
I think we
such a great question.
Maybe we just need some new language, right? Like, but because it's like sharing and like all that stuff. But
it's so like you've shepherded and led all these people through, a lot of people through recovery.
Yeah.
Right. We won't name them by name right now. And one of the things I've heard you say as recently as, this morning is, look, this kind of white knuckle approach to being a leader who performs, right? That's the temptation, right? Is I don't have permission to be vulnerable, to be all of these weak feeling or seeming things. It won't be good for my brand, my personal brand, right? But the problem is that the white knuckle model, it does not sustain. What sustains is wholeness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think the part of it that's hard is, we're kind of moving into an arena where therapy is becoming more prominent. I think that we've got to, and I'm all for it. I want to get insight from the outside, but because we're so untrained to actually show up and be present with other people and be like, hey, you matter. I'm going to listen. We're untrained, and men specifically haven't been trained that way because culture has shaped us. And there's a story here. You go back 100 years and look at the Industrial Revolution. Like, dad gets ripped out of this agrarian environment, right? And then he's promised better and more through the Industrial Revolution, and he becomes a cog in a wheel. He's no longer creating. He's got no juice, no energy, working 12 hours in this machine. Then he goes back home and he's got no energy, right? This is still kind of happening in our world.
Well, even like I've been going through Death of a Salesman recently, and just listening to that on Audible, and just like hearing, I can't remember the main character's name right now, but hearing his own internal dialogue, and he's losing his mind, right? Hearing him lose his mind. And it's such an amazing picture. It's actually a picture of the book of Ecclesiastes, right? A modern picture of the book of Ecclesiastes. And it's so true that like when we remove ourselves from purpose and wholeness, like we're working for nothing, no thing. We're working for no thing. And I'm curious, like how you would frame up if we wanted to help leaders develop their own philosophy of wholeness, like how would you articulate where they can start? What are some of the...
Yeah, you start simple. I think that when I look at wholeness, and I think we could all agree to this, right? There's what I call our core is 6 strong, meaning that you're physical, you're spiritual, emotional, relational, financial, professional. So I would ask it this way: does your money ever affect you physically? Sure. Do your relationships ever affect your emotions and affect you physically? Yeah. So all of life is integrated. So the word for integer is whole number, right? So integrated. The problem is when I say all 6 of those, and if I broke them all down, it's overwhelming. So what I believe is you start with the one that actually how you experience the world, physical. Okay, so what is the proper order of our physical life? Most people would think I'm talking about fitness. I'm not. I would say sleep. Scientifically proven. If you do a study on neurology and biology, sleep. Are you getting 7.5 hours of sleep? It's actually a therapy God gave you to deal with the weight that you carry. Yeah. And so, use your Whoop band, use your Oura ring, track it. Yeah, but at the end of the day you were created to get 7.5 hours of sleep. And children are going to sleep longer, so don't be mad at your teenager because he's sleeping and he's growing. But the point is that we're not getting enough sleep. This thing that God gave us to replenish. And I think I read recently from some scientists who said the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. are actually when your body most replenishes and resets the hormone system. And like, I don't know if it's true. I didn't study it, but I'm going to do it because it seems like wisdom. All right. So after sleep, what's next? Rest and recreation, recreation, play. When's the last time you played? If it's not on your calendar and you want to be a great leader and not not a good leader.
A bad leader. If you don't want to be a bad leader.
Podcast.
Yeah. Well, I've done that plenty of times.
Yeah, we always have to bleep out what Taylor says.
Yeah, about
It's
80%
fine.
of my content is not on the show for that reason.
Jesus will just cut it out. No big deal.
Anyway, then I move into fuel and movement. I won't even call it exercise or fitness. It's just movement. Your body was created to move. And an object in motion tends to stay in motion. We start there. Now, the spiritual, interestingly enough, there is no Hebrew word for spiritual. Jesus wouldn't be like, how's your spiritual life? Which to us means, how's your church attendance and your Bible reading and your prayer? He would ask you, how's your life? Right? I find that great because all of what I said, even though I use spiritual and I could define that, but all of life is spiritual. The reason why work is not spiritual to people is because they have bad theology. Like, work matters. Like, that's the story. Not to everybody, because their theology is like when we all get to heaven, what a great time we're going to have. But in the story, it starts off in Genesis. It basically like goes from a garden and it ends in a garden city. There's development. There's growth. There's architecture. There's cities. There's streets. Things are important. So work matters to God. So when you eject or you separate the sacred and the secular, you have a problem. All of life matters. So how do I make sure that my work matters, right? Like, well, that you gotta make your workplace a worship space, and that sounds weird when I just said it out of my mouth. But so Brad, do I play worship music? No. You ascribe worth. So what does God do? He ascribes worth to people. He values people. He chases people. But on the spiritual side, when I look at that area of my life, what I heard most of my life was love God and love people. That doesn't sound wrong, does it?
No, it sounds great.
Sounds great, except for it's incomplete.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, God says that you love him because he first loved you, which begs the question, do you know how to actually practice being loved by God? Changed my life, dude. I was trying to love God and love people. I was freaking exhausted, but nobody taught me how to practice being loved by God until I caught a glimpse. And now to this day, you know how you do that practically? You build a playlist of songs that communicate over you and allow your imagination and your breath to connect. Like, God loves me. I growing up in instability, bro, I practice this to this day all the time. Because you know what's hard as a man? Actually receiving love. I think it's leaders. What they've been inoculated with is the way that I receive acceptance and love and value is by producing. It's just, I'm not a human doing. I'm a human being. Wow. So what I found that practically actually was valuable in Scripture was actually recognizing that God doesn't have love. He is love. And freaking he comes as a perfect father. And I'm looking downside up rather than upside down because I didn't have my dad around me all the time. So I had to get a picture of a perfect father, even if your earthly father, I don't care how great they weren't perfect. And so now we practice. If I can't put it into practice, then it's of no use to me. And I mean that, like, I've got to be able to practice that. So I do. That's the essence of my spiritual pillar is like be loved by God. And then I can put it on the calendar, like, did I actually feel it? Did I get a sense that the God of the universe believes in me, accepts me? Or have I just been inoculated by religious tradition that says, do you accept Jesus? Do you believe in Jesus? Do you know he believes in you? Do you know he accepts you? I didn't know that for a long time.
That phrase or that idea really struck a chord with me because I can relate to it. Like, and I feel like there are so many people, men and women out there, that actually accepting love is hard. I typically associate accepting love in the same way that you just said it, as if I perform, then I can receive. But receiving a free gift that I don't think that I necessarily deserve or haven't earned is super hard. Problem is, you're always scrambling for worth. Like, you're always working so hard to try and get it right. And I am, for anybody who's on the Enneagram, I'm a 3, so I'm a performer.
So
yeah, man. Yeah. So like, it almost runs a little bit counterintuitive to say, hey, this part that actually gives me a lot of drive, that's actually really good, again, is not sustainable. Because if that's the fuel that I need, that fuel only comes as I succeed. And most of us would be able to go like, yeah, we learn more from our failures than than succeeding. But that's not a very sustainable model if that's what you run on, right? Yeah. So every time you fail, if that's true, and when I am not living in my healthiest self, which is fairly often, then I run out of gas, man.
I think if we could change, right, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. I think failing, if we could just change the language to learning. And then what does it cost when you go up in learning, like you go get your master's? It costs money. Yeah. It's costly. I'll tell you this for the leaders that are watching this, because this has been my experience over decades. I'm not created to be driven. I'm created to actually be on target with mission. And if you train me properly and you actually heal my heart, then that compassion floods out, and that becomes the juice that actually moves me. Yeah. And I believe in that, but I also have to rest.
Yeah. No, that's so good. So instead of playing the game from a spot of fear, you can play it from a spot of confidence and knowing who you are. I actually just used this idea when we were recording just a little bit ago too. And I love sports analogies or talk because Brad has no idea what we're talking about. But I mentioned Cooper Kupp, who after winning the Super Bowl, and they asked him, I think he was the MVP, I can't remember, of that game. They said, hey, kind of like, what's changed? Like your career kind of flipped. And he goes, hey, I stopped playing for victory and I started playing from victory. Like I stopped playing as if I'm scared, as if that's going to be and I am so guilty of that in my own life. I often play from like, fear is a great motivator, right? It does keep me going to perform and do all those kind of things. But man, to be able to rest and actually have that drive and that purpose, it is game changing, and it's sustainable, right? Like I don't have the peaks and the valleys of like. It also makes it less be about me, right? Like because when I'm performing, it's all about me. It's about what I'm doing. It's about all those kind of things.
You've probably heard in the scripture, perfect love casts out fear.
Yeah,
it's great. It's great. Let's put it on a bumper sticker. But what the heck is that?
I actually have a tat.
Do you? You got that?
Right next to the daily leader tattoo.
But like, what is it? What does that even mean? Right? That's great. Oh, perfect love. It sounds ethereal. As I deep dive it, I think it's love that's given, love that's received, and love that's returned. That's what casts out fear. So to your point, like it's hard to receive it, but God gave it, but I have to receive it. I know plenty of people who say they follow Jesus who haven't received it. They're living in He loves me, but I've got to perform. It's all about my behavior. Yeah. No, you've got to actually meditate. Like you've got to use your imagination to receive it, but then you return it, and then it's actually perfected in you. So there's the value, like to a person who's out there, maybe even watching this, who's like, why even like church and go to this and that? Well, the value is that there isn't any human love like what's being presented in Scripture in the love of God. I didn't say what religious or pastors or people who say, because they oftentimes fail and fall short. But when it comes to God's outrageous, relentless pursuit of humans, and story after story of broken people, and Jesus, the woman caught in the act of adultery, like, hey, we're your accusers. I'm not accusing you. Go and sin no more. Like, the atmosphere of that is so, like, I just wish that people who said they followed Jesus actually did. Like they actually, you could experience that. It would be awesome. But we're all on that journey to figure that out. But I think there's the value for somebody to actually have that. So if a person doesn't practice it, then it's not gonna metabolize into your system. So all these things have to be trained. So every area of life, the feel wheel, the emotional wheel, we feel inadequate to actually understand that as men because we just haven't been trained. Our dads weren't good at it. We're going back, and what's their history? My grandfather was in the war, and then my uncles and everybody, and so what did they do? They sought business, and business was the whole sum. But they were horrible husbands and fathers. And then I wasn't mad at them. I was just like, how can I be a great husband, father? Be good in business or whatever ministry, whatever you're called to do. And freaking takes work, dude. If you want a life that works, you're gonna have to work. And that's hard, because we say this in the arena of greatness, like hard work is hard work, right?
That's right. I think I'd love to camp out a little bit on the arena of greatness and the work you're doing there. So like, as I reflect on some of your resume, like you're actually a high performing person, right? You're not talking about high performance, but you're someone who's built congregations of churches into the thousands. You've been you were a part of GoDaddy early on in a sales role there, building the revenue around that business. So you're not talking just like from books in theory, but you're talking from the actual practice of working and growing and scaling leadership. Why did that journey bring you to the arena of greatness, and why is that something that you're passionate about right now?
Yeah, I think men as a whole have become a mission field for me. And the reason why is because interacting with men inside the church, outside the church, I see a lot of pain, a lot of disappointment, a lot of isolation, a lot of loneliness. And it's kind of the story of the two shoe salesmen who go to Africa. One goes to the west, one goes to the east. The guy who goes to the west says, nobody here wears shoes. Let's pack up and head home. The guy who goes to the east says, nobody here wears shoes. Send everything you got. So what I've realized is that men are profoundly relational, but they don't think they are, right? You get a group of guys together in the right environment, you give them the right questions to ask, and they will stay for hours talking, right? So you just got to produce the right atmosphere. This started in my backyard with cigars and bourbon, and basically having transparent conversations.
Why didn't you bring any of that?
Yeah, maybe.
It's in the car. No, it's not. But I did have a couple good cigars yesterday playing golf, so I should.
So legitimately, that could go back to the tactical about how do you get vulnerability.
Yeah.
You create an atmosphere.
That's right.
Someone said this. I read it in Cigar Aficionado, not the Bible. Cigar Aficionado, the guy from Sons of Anarchy, I forgot his name. Anyway, he was talking about how that it's smoking a cigar is literally meditative, because I shut my mouth and then I create an incense, and I was like, that's interesting. So with men, what I found is that I gave them a safe environment, an environment that wasn't religious to them in their minds, because it was kind of contrarian to what they thought somebody who was a pastor would do. And what I found is that there was hundreds of these groups out there. They call them Holy Smokes or all these cheesy names, right? But the point is that they felt safe. And once they felt safe, they actually started to open up, right? That's not the healthiest environment for everyone, okay? But at the same token, people ask me, like, Brad, what if somebody's an alcoholic? I said, yeah. I said, actually, probably more people that aren't declared alcoholics I'll understand, because the question I like to ask guys, it's one thing if you have one drink, it's another thing if you have 7 in an hour. And then most of the time I'll have guys be like, I'm having 7. You're sedating. What is it that you're sedating? What are you trying to soothe? What are you suppressing? You're stressed out. So let's work on that, okay? That doesn't make you bad. Now you're aware. Let's help you. So in that came all these conversations, these men, and a lot of them were high performers, guys that were CEOs, entrepreneurs in my backyard, and I like those guys. I love what they're doing. They're creating, but oftentimes what was happening is that there just wasn't a space for them. And then what I realized is, well, we can't just drink bourbon and smoke cigars. Like we actually got to take this. But what I found is, for me, in the church, and what I now refer to as celebration on Sunday, where people celebrate on Sunday is great, but we weren't discipling and training people, and so taking the physical as the first entry point to actually these other areas of our life, I started to realize that, and so then I started to bring into the context of the workout metaphor and parable to get people more aware of Scripture. Like this scriptural stories, like Bible's 90% narrative. There's some great stories in it of just some total messed up dudes, right? That's why I love the Bible. But nobody gave me that frame. I had to go out there and learn that. So when you can take a workout and be like, this is the first time I was climbing Tom's thumb here, and I felt a question come to my heart, right? I'm not saying like God spoke in an audible voice, but he was like, how much did the cross weigh that Jesus carried up Golgotha? And I was like, I don't know. So I was Googling it on the way down, and they say it was 300 pounds. And I was like, dang. Like, and I've been to Israel, so I've walked that path, and it's like an ascent, right? But I was like, is that what did he carry that? And then they, whoever studies this out, right? Historians believe they just carry the crossbeam. But have you ever carried a 100-pound sandbag on your back, dude? It's a lot. And then have you ever been beaten and then had to do it? In my mind, I'm like, it was cheesy. I was, Taylor, don't judge me for this, but I was like, CrossFit. No. And I decided not to go that route. But what I did see is that Bible says this. Now we're in a world of like embrace the suck and intentional
Stay
suffering.
hard.
Yeah, exactly. But the Bible says that Jesus, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross. That was like a light bulb moment for me. Like, whatever you're currently suffering with, whatever you have suffered, can you find any joy? And I don't mean just be optimistic and fake it, but I know this, that suffering produces some stuff in us if we get the proper perspective. So I think as men, we need to be taught to do some things because, the guys who started Tough Mudder and Spartan Race, they all started realizing that we drive minivans. We don't chop wood. We don't get messy. We work in cubicles. It's antithetical to our makeup. At some point, we have got to get tangible and trained and tactical. That the guys that were in the military or played sports, or even if you didn't, you need to be in some sort of visceral environment that activates it. Now, what if we can make it intentional? What if we can make more deposits, right? I don't know about you, I can go to the gym. I've gone to the gym most of my life. It's great. I can stare at myself in the mirror and get distracted by things that are around me. Or I can create an atmosphere and an environment where I train with brothers. And guess what happens? Taylor, I don't know, you work out?
I try. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Do you do it with a group of guys or by yourself?
Most of the time with a group of guys, or at least somebody else.
Little tenny?
Yeah, or go play. I play a lot of tennis these days.
Okay, so when you train with a group of guys, like during that time period that you're training, do you think about pornography?
Not typically.
Right. I always tell guys, like, did you?
There are moments where it might cross his mind, but it's fleeting. It's very brief.
And the workout wasn't good. Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
What I would tell you is that when you're on mission, which is the problem with men, they're not on mission. We need mission, man. That's the way that God designed us. We need to understand that we were created for a mission. And so when we train, then we got to go do some things. But in that environment, what I started finding is like, so if I get up at 5 a.m. and do this from 5 to 6:30, my day's better. So we say be great before 8. If your morning's hard, then your day will be easy. And the truth is that I have been doing this for about 8 months. My days got better. It wasn't the magic that produced success for me. It was actually the medicine that provided stability for me.
Well, this is what's interesting about you. That you were already doing it. You were already performing at a high level. So you go from cigars and drinks with buddies and having great conversation to realizing, man, there's something here. Let's start working out together. Let's be more intentional with these workouts. So like if I show up to Arena of Greatness for the first time and I've never been yet, what am I going to, what's going to happen to me?
Yeah, so if you come Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the first 20 minutes is to get you to be silent and to meditation. So we provide an opportunity because that's just one thing that we need. So you're looking around another group of guys that are all doing that and everybody is growing in that portion. Then we basically break after that 20 minutes. We get together and we have coaches that are basically going to take us to that workout. And then after that workout, which is going to last 25 minutes, 45 minutes, then at the end, we're going to put everybody on their back. We're going to take them into actual intentional breath work. And the reason why is we connected to Genesis 2:7. And every great master of breath work usually got their start from Genesis 2:7. God breathed into man's nostrils a breath of life, and man became a living person or a living soul. So we take them through that, and we're going to train you in tactical box breathing, 4-7-8 breathing.
We actually did box breathing with our buddy Shane Kuiper on a podcast.
We have.
Yeah. It was awesome.
Yeah,
So we know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So let's say here's the deal. This is the human brain. Your amygdala basically is the fight, flight, or freeze. We're not running away from bears anymore, right? It's just stress. Our kid's diaper was loaded or something. I don't know. But
that is very stressful. Taylor's about to have twins, by the way. I don't know if we told you that yet.
It's going to be stressful.
He's about to have 2 at the same time.
They're
crazy.
coming. They're coming. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, bottom line is,
So yeah, keep
breath
going.
is
So
the connection between the body and the brain. And all it does is it causes a prefrontal cortex to the decision maker to lower your heart rate and actually settle yourself. So it's not new agey, it's actually biblical, and it's actually great. Bottom line is, get people to calm. So you're not in control of everything, but you are in control of a few things, and breath is one of those things. And actually, it's proven that your heart at rest is 60 beats per minute. You can literally listen to What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong, and you will actually experience rest. There's a couple of albums that are out there in the church world, and they put the songs to 60 beats per minute, and you could literally practice peace. So that's one thing, like you can actually practice peace. How? You architect the environment. So what you think about and what you listen to will cause your physical heart to slow down. Okay, now your prefrontal cortex slows down and now you can think. It's great. But then we speak a blessing over men. We speak words of affirmation in life, and as men we need it. And if we don't get that consistently, we'll either perform or rebel. So what we need is men that see us, that will actually do that with us. And so that's the entirety of the workout. Then we actually, every quarter, we do a what we call an adventure to live, and basically we do something fun with a group of guys. So in April 11th through the 14th, we'll take a group of guys to Mexico. We'll go bluefin tuna fishing and mahi fishing and all that stuff. So, but we need those on a quarterly basis. That's what I found after years of doing this. So I worked at GoDaddy. I'm crushing it. Have all the money that I want to do whatever I want, but I don't do it. And I can guarantee you guys out there, what we do is we think, oh, well, I went on vacation with my family. Yeah, how stress-free was that? It's not. Then we seek experience, right? So this is what adolescence does. Children want more. Give me more. Then we want experience, but the mark of maturity is shared experience. So I could tell you, like, man, I went to Alaska and shot a moose, and you're like, you're awesome. But if we did it together, we'd be bonded.
Yeah.
And we need more moments like that.
That's
so good.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. I'm like, hey man, let's go. Gives me excited, right? And I think that's the point, man. We are so much better like together and connected than we are apart and fragmented. And yet that is often where I feel like people find themselves, is apart and fragmented. And so I love what you're doing here, because taking groups of men, putting them together, shared experiences, giving them safety, the ability to share, the ability to speak blessing over them, and like really, really emphasizing kind of that wholeness and health. I just think that's really cool.
All right, so this is the fun part of the podcast, our rapid fire.
Yep.
But we're rebranding it to slow burn.
Yeah, slow burn.
Right?
Slow burn, hot takes.
So Taylor, give us kind of the framework here. How do you want us to try this with Brad here this time around?
Yeah, I think this is going to be fun or not. We'll find out, because
this
Brad
might be terrible.
Fun for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We're going to be waiting on pins and needles. I don't know about yourself.
Slow burn is rapid fire. We're going to give you a paradox, a leadership paradox. You've got 30 seconds to tell us which way you lean and why you lean that way.
I feel like I have just a second to decide which way I lean, and then I have 30 seconds to tell you why.
Correct. That's fine.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
right.
let's do this.
Okay. We've already discussed this one. Being or doing? What's more important in leadership, being or doing?
Being. Doing flows out of being. And I think that for the most part, it's what's adverse and contrarian. But if your being actually informs your doing, you have more wholeness in your life.
God, you even made it. You made
Man,
it in the time.
crushed it.
All right, it's working. All right, we probably know this one. People, tasks.
People. Yeah. I think relationship and results, there is a paradox in those two, but I think relationally, if you have intentionality with your people, then you will train and develop them for the tasks. They're both important, of course. That's what we're saying, but put people over tasks.
Love it.
Well, you already did relationships or results right in that people and tasks
Yeah, I
one.
mean,
Well
he basically
done.
crushed that one. Yeah.
Values or vision? Values or vision?
It's a good one. I probably lean vision.
All right.
Yeah, I lean
Yeah,
vision.
tell us why.
I think a clear and compelling vision Clarity is a key that unlocks access to a lot of things. So if you don't have a clear, compelling vision, and I think that I'm going to cross the 30-second threshold with it, because like purpose, mission, vision, all gets discombobulated, right?
Yep,
I heard
yep.
someone say it this way, like NASA's overarching purpose is to explore space. But when you get down to their mission, which is a 3-year sort of target, like we're going to go to Mars or something like that, like I think people have a lack of clarity on that. But when you give me a clear, compelling vision, a picture of the future, right, then the values can tag into it.
That's
Great
so good.
insights.
Yeah, answer doesn't count because you went over 30 seconds.
know,
but
it doesn't,
yeah.
so
But that's all right. It was good.
Yeah.
Good answer anyway.
Well, by the way, there is a phone a friend clause here,
Oh, is there?
especially
Yeah.
if they're a famous athlete, celebrity. They're
Awesome.
we especially want you to call them,
Yeah.
but you know,
Yeah.
just in case you get stuck.
Yeah, and there's a point system here that nobody knows how it works. It's kind of like whose line is it anyways? You have 17 points
Probably
currently.
the people watching, they
Yeah.
are giving, I disagree
That's
with
right.
you.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That's
they're
okay.
on
Yeah, please
YouTube,
comment if you disagree with Brad.
Yeah.
We'd love
Yeah,
love to see your dissent.
Goodness or greatness?
I'm going to go with greatness.
Wow.
I think people think greatness is ego. I think it's a display of something that is innate in every human, given by God. And I think it's something we should lean into. And I think contained in greatness is the goodness of God, not your own.
Well said.
3 more points.
Culture or productivity?
Culture.
All right,
Yeah.
culture.
Culture
Why?
is the air we breathe, man. So you can have productivity and it creates toxicity. But I think culture is the breakfast of champions, man. So you got to build that sucker.
Culture's the Wheaties.
Mhm.
Love that. All right, recovery, which is like maintenance, or performance?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going recovery. Yeah, I think attending to the sinews and the muscles are the things that build performance, right? And every great person would say you must have strong recovery. What is LeBron James spends $1 million on his body? Should tell us something.
Yeah, he's doing okay. Brad doesn't know
He's
who
all right.
that is.
Oh, he doesn't. Yeah, there's this thing called a basketball.
Yeah. People shoot it. It's a billion, trillion dollar industry, whatever it is. And it
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, that's all right. He's pretty good too. LeBron James is not
Not
bad.
bad.
Yeah. People make these arguments. Ooh. All right, last one. LeBron James or Michael Jordan.
I'm going to say Michael Jordan. I'm a product of the 80s
Yeah,
and
that's
90s.
right. That's right,
So,
baby.
like, I mean, LeBron's a force, but Michael Jordan was a phenom.
Yep.
Okay, if people want to find you,
Yeah.
if they want to learn more about what you're doing, how do they do it?
Yeah, unleashgreatness.com. Great domain name, by the way. We didn't even get into that conversation, but that's probably where they can do it. Arenaofgreatness.com, ScottsdalePodcast.com.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay,
I'll
I
be
love
in
it.
the show notes.
You got 3 options. It'll all be in the show notes.
Yep.
Brad, this has been a lot of fun, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
guys,
you, man.
Really appreciate it.
Like,
Subscribe.
subscribe,
Yeah.
comment,
Yep. Do all those
Share.
things. Anything else they should do?
Daily Leader Tat.
Daily leader tat. Yeah, we're waiting for our first person to get a daily leader tattoo.
Free executive coaching for life.
Yeah. Wow,
Wow.
that is an offer.
If
right
you get
there.
a daily leader tattoo,
yeah.
you get free executive
Does
coaching
it matter the
for life.
size? Because I mean,
Nope.
I might go micro.
Nope. You can micro that thing. If that is,
there-
if that
is there a
that
limit to the
logo is
number that
on
you just-
someone's body?
Yeah, if you just had 100 people that were like, no, screw it, I'm going to put one right on my butt cheek. No one's ever going to see it, but I got proof.
Do you want to see it?
If
Yeah,
if
you
somebody
need
gets a daily
confirmation.
leader tattoo, and I want to see it.
So
and
this
you
is
get
just
free executive coaching
first
for life.
person offer, but not like 100, because 100 could be like all of a sudden you're slated with 100 people there.
Yeah. You better
That's a good point.
qualify it.
Yeah, all the weeds. That
I
we
can do
get
it for
into
3.
here.
I can do
Yeah.
it for 3.
Yeah,
Oh,
awesome. All right, three daily leader podcast free slates out there.
Does it have
so-
to be Daily Leader Podcast? Could it just be Daily Leader?
It's got to be the logo.
Okay.
It's got to be the
All right.
logo.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love it. Well,
He didn't say temporary tattoos doesn't work, so.
yeah, you gotta
Oh,
put the framework on there better. So no, fantastic. Well, with that, on that note, we will see you all again next time.